Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital Today channel. Scout Kane stood up, her small frame somehow commanding a room filled with powerful adults, and delivered a revelation that detonated like a bomb in the heart of the trial. What had begun as another dramatic day in the long, painful aftermath of Drew Kane's shooting instantly transformed into one of the most unforgettable scenes in General Hospital history, because Scout, with a mixture of fear, courage, and heartbreaking clarity far beyond her years, pointed directly at Willow Tate and revealed her as the person who shot Drew. Gasps rippled through the courtroom, chairs scraped against the floor, and more than one jaw hit the polished wood benches as Scout's words echoed, each syllable cutting deeper than the last, rewriting everything the people of Port Charles thought they knew about that night, about Willow, and about the tangled web of lies that had slowly suffocated the truth. Drew Kane, still pale from his injuries but sitting upright with determined resolve, looked as though the world had tilted beneath him. For weeks, he had struggled not only with the physical pain of the gunshot wound but with the emotional torment of not knowing who had tried to kill him or why. He had replayed the night over and over in his mind, searching for clues, fragments of memory, anything that could make sense of the violence that had nearly taken his life. To hear his own daughter speak the truth so plainly, especially a truth this devastating, was both a relief and a heartbreak he never anticipated. His eyes filled with tears, not just from the shock of learning Willow's role but from the crushing realization that Scout had carried the secret alone, burdened by fear and confusion, until the moment she found the courage to speak out in the most public, terrifying setting imaginable. Scout's voice trembled as she explained what she saw, how that night had etched itself into her memory with a clarity she wished she could forget. She described the sound of raised voices, the sharp crack of the gunshot, and the image of Willow standing there, frozen in shock, the weapon still in her hand. Scout didn't embellish or dramatize, she didn't need to. The simplicity of her words made them all the more powerful, and as she spoke, it became impossible to dismiss her testimony as childish imagination or confusion. This was a child recounting a trauma, and the truth poured out of her with devastating honesty. Every adult in the room felt the weight of responsibility, the shame of realizing that while they had been arguing, accusing, and maneuvering, Scout had been silently holding the key to everything. Willow's reaction was immediate and explosive, though not in the way many expected. At first, she laughed, a brittle, hollow sound that only deepened the horror of the moment, shaking her head as if Scout's words were some kind of cruel misunderstanding. She insisted it couldn't be true, that Scout was mistaken, that trauma had twisted her memory. But as the murmurs in the courtroom grew louder and the judge struggled to restore order, Willow's composure cracked. Her face drained of color, her eyes darted wildly from Scout to Drew to the attorneys, and for the first time, fear overtook the carefully maintained image of innocence she had clung to for so long. The truth, once spoken aloud, had a way of stripping away pretense, and Willow was suddenly exposed, standing at the center of a storm she could no longer control. Michael Corinthos, seated only a few rows behind Willow, looked as though he had been physically struck. His love for Willow had survived affairs, secrets, and betrayals that would have destroyed most relationships, but this was something else entirely. To hear Scout accuse Willow of attempted murder shattered the last remnants of the life Michael thought he was building. He wanted to stand up, to defend Willow instinctively, to insist there had to be another explanation, but the look on Scout's face stopped him cold. Michael had seen that look before, in the eyes of people telling the truth when the truth hurts too much to bear. His heart broke not just for Drew or Scout, but for himself, realizing that the woman he loved might be capable of an act so violent and destructive. Across the aisle, Carly Spencer felt a familiar mix of fury and dread surge through her. She had never fully trusted Willow, despite moments of sympathy and connection, and Scout's revelation felt like grim validation of every doubt Carly had ever harbored. Yet even Carly, hardened by decades of betrayal and bloodshed in Port Charles, seemed shaken by the sheer scope of the fallout. This wasn't just another scandal, this was a crime that threatened to tear apart families, friendships, and alliances that had been painstakingly built over years. Carly's mind raced ahead, already calculating the consequences, the legal maneuvers, the damage control that would be needed to protect Michael and the children from the blast radius of Willow's actions. Nina Reeves, sitting stiffly beside Sunny Corinthos, looked like she might collapse under the weight of conflicting emotions. As Willow's mother, Nina had fought tooth and nail for a place in her daughter's life, enduring rejection, heartbreak, and humiliation in the hope that one day they could truly be a family. Now, Scout's accusation threatened to turn that dream into a nightmare beyond Nina's worst fears. She wanted to scream that it couldn't be true, that Willow wasn't capable of such violence, but deep down, Nina felt the icy grip of recognition. She had seen Willow unravel before, seen the cracks beneath the surface, and the possibility that her daughter had crossed such a line filled Nina with terror, not just for Willow's future, but for her own role in shaping the woman Willow had become. The legal implications of Scout's testimony were immediate and severe. The defense scrambled, objecting loudly, questioning the reliability of a child witness, arguing that Scout's proximity to the events and her emotional attachment to Drew compromised her objectivity. But the prosecution seized the moment, recognizing the power of Scout's words and the way they aligned with previously unexplained evidence. Details that had once seemed insignificant suddenly took on new meaning. Inconsistencies in Willow's statements, unexplained gaps in her timeline, the mysterious absence of the weapon. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to assemble itself in the minds of everyone present, and the picture it formed was damning. As the judge called for a recess to restore order, the courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters rushed for the exits, phones pressed to their ears as they prepared to blast the news across every media outlet in the city. Family members clustered together in stunned silence or heated argument, alliances shifting in real time as the implications sank in. Scout was quickly ushered out by a court officer, Drew's protective hand resting gently on her shoulder, his expression a mixture of pride, sorrow, and fierce determination. He whispered words meant only for her, reassurance that she had done the right thing, that telling the truth, no matter how painful, was an act of courage that would ultimately set them free. Willow, meanwhile, sat alone, the weight of the courtroom's collective gaze pressing down on her like a physical force. The denial that had flared so brightly at first began to flicker and fade, replaced by something darker and more complicated. Memories she had tried desperately to bury clawed their way back to the surface, the rage, the fear, the moment everything spiraled out of control. Whether the shooting had been intentional or the result of a terrible accident no longer seemed to matter in the eyes of the law or the public. A gun had been fired, Drew had nearly died, and Scout had seen it all. Willow's world, once built on fragile justifications and half-truths, was collapsing in on itself. In the days that followed, Port Charles buzzed with speculation and outrage. Friends took sides, social media exploded with opinions, and the once clear lines between hero and villain blurred beyond recognition. Some argued that Willow was a victim of circumstance, pushed too far by secrets and betrayals until she snapped. Others saw her as a cold, calculating figure who had finally been unmasked by the one witness she never anticipated, a child who refused to stay silent. Through it all, Scout became an unlikely symbol of truth and bravery, her decision to speak out inspiring both admiration and controversy. For Drew, the revelation marked the beginning of a new chapter, one defined not by victimhood but by resolve. He committed himself to protecting Scout from the media frenzy, determined to shield her from the uglier sides of the justice system while standing firm in his pursuit of accountability. He knew the road ahead would be long and painful, but for the first time since the shooting, he felt a sense of clarity. The truth, however devastating, had finally come into the light. As for Willow, the path forward was uncertain and terrifying. Legal battles loomed, relationships lay in ruins, and the image she had so carefully cultivated was irreparably shattered. Whether she would ultimately accept responsibility, fight the charges with every ounce of strength she had left, or reveal deeper secrets that could further complicate the case remained to be seen. One thing, however, was undeniable: Scout's courtroom revelation had changed everything. In a single, heart-stopping moment, a child's voice had cut through layers of deception, forcing Port Charles to confront a truth that would echo for years to come, redefining lives, loyalties, and the very meaning of justice in the world of General Hospital. The shockwaves from Scout's courtroom revelation didn't stop when the judge's gavel struck or when the spectators were finally cleared from the gallery. Instead, they rolled outward through Port Charles like an aftershock from a powerful earthquake, rattling every relationship, every secret, and every carefully constructed lie that had managed to survive until now. The truth Scout spoke was no longer confined to that courtroom. It followed everyone home, into hospital corridors, penthouse living rooms, and quiet bedrooms where sleep refused to come. In a town where scandals are practically a second language, this one felt different, heavier, darker, and far more personal. In the hours after the recess, Drew sat alone in a private conference room with his attorney, the walls closing in as the adrenaline faded and reality set in. He kept seeing Scout's face when she pointed at Willow, her hand shaking, her eyes glossy with tears she refused to let fall until she was safely out of the room. Drew's heart ached with guilt. He wondered how many times Scout had almost told him the truth, how many nights she had replayed that moment in her mind while he lay in a hospital bed or focused on his own recovery. As much as he wanted justice, Drew was now consumed by one overriding need, protecting his daughter from further harm. He made it clear to his legal team that no strategy was acceptable if it endangered Scout emotionally or psychologically, even if it meant sacrificing leverage in the case. Scout, meanwhile, was struggling with the aftermath in her own quiet way. Back at home, she sat curled up on the couch, clutching a pillow like a lifeline, the sounds of the courtroom echoing in her ears. She kept asking if she had done something wrong, if Willow would hate her forever, if people would be angry that she spoke up. Drew reassured her again and again, telling her that bravery doesn't mean you're not scared, it means you tell the truth anyway. Yet even his words couldn't erase the weight Scout felt, knowing she had changed lives with a single sentence. Childhood innocence had been replaced by a harsh understanding, the truth can save, but it can also destroy. Willow's night was far more chaotic. After being escorted out of the courthouse, she found herself unable to return home, as if the walls there would accuse her too. Every news alert on her phone felt like another indictment, every headline screaming her name beside words like shooter and attempted murder. She replayed Scout's testimony over and over, searching desperately for a way to twist it, reinterpret it, make it less damning. But memory is a cruel mirror, and Willow could no longer deny what she had done, or at least, what she had allowed to happen. Whether driven by rage, fear, or a moment of emotional collapse, the gun had gone off, and Drew had paid the price. Michael finally confronted Willow late that night, the silence between them heavier than any argument they'd ever had. He didn't yell at first, he simply asked her to tell him the truth. That question alone shattered what little resolve Willow had left. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to explain the circumstances, insisting she never meant to hurt Drew, that everything had spiraled out of control faster than she could stop it. Michael listened, but his expression remained unreadable. Love, betrayal, anger, and grief warred inside him, each emotion demanding dominance. When he finally spoke, his voice broke, not with rage, but with heartbreak. He admitted that even if Willow hadn't intended to kill Drew, the damage was already irreversible. Trust, once broken at this level, could never be fully restored. Nina's reaction unfolded more slowly but with devastating intensity. Alone in her hotel room, she stared at her reflection, seeing not just herself but years of choices that had led to this moment. She wondered if her own desperation to connect with Willow had blinded her to warning signs, if she had enabled behaviors she should have challenged. The maternal instinct to protect her daughter clashed violently with the moral horror of what Willow was accused of doing. Nina knew she would stand by Willow publicly, how could she not, but privately, she was forced to confront a terrifying question. What if Scout was telling the absolute truth, and Willow truly had crossed a line she could never step back from? Sonny Corinthos, watching the chaos unfold from a distance, recognized the familiar pattern of violence and consequence. He understood better than most how a single impulsive act could destroy multiple lives. Though not directly involved, Sonny couldn't ignore the ripple effects on Michael, on Carly, and on the fragile stability of their family. He quietly began making contingency plans, ensuring that Michael and the children would be protected from the fallout, both legally and emotionally. Sonny had learned long ago that when scandals explode in Port Charles, they rarely limit themselves to their original targets. At the hospital, conversations hushed as Willow's name was mentioned. Nurses whispered, doctors exchanged wary glances, and patients speculated openly about how someone so seemingly gentle could be capable of such violence. The duality of Willow's public persona versus the accusations against her fascinated and unsettled everyone. It forced the town to confront an uncomfortable truth: monsters don't always look monstrous. Sometimes they look like caregivers, partners, friends, people you trust without question. As the trial resumed days later, the atmosphere was even more charged than before. Scout's testimony had opened the door to new evidence, and the prosecution moved swiftly to capitalize on it. Forensic experts revisited ballistic reports, timelines were reconstructed, and witnesses previously dismissed were called back to the stand. Each new detail seemed to tighten the net around Willow, while her defense fought desperately to frame the shooting as a tragic accident fueled by emotional distress rather than criminal intent. The courtroom became a battleground of narratives, one portraying Willow as a broken woman pushed beyond her limits, the other painting her as someone who made a catastrophic choice and must now face the consequences. Scout was spared further testimony, but her presence was felt in every exchange. The defense's attempts to undermine her credibility were met with public outrage, and the judge issued stern warnings against any strategy that appeared to re-traumatize a child witness. In a rare moment of unity, the courtroom seemed to agree on one thing: Scout's courage had earned her protection. Drew eventually took the stand, his voice steady as he described the night of the shooting, the confusion, the pain, and the slow realization that someone he trusted had been involved. He didn't embellish or seek vengeance. Instead, he spoke about accountability, about how truth, even when it hurts, was the only path forward. His testimony resonated deeply, reinforcing the idea that this case was about more than guilt or innocence. It was about facing reality, no matter how devastating. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered, some supporting Willow, others demanding justice for Drew. Signs clashed with chants, and the divide in Port Charles became impossible to ignore. Families avoided each other at social events, friendships fractured, and long-standing alliances crumbled under the strain. The shooting had become a mirror reflecting the town's deepest fears and flaws. As the trial neared its conclusion, one thing became painfully clear: there would be no true winners. Regardless of the verdict, lives had been permanently altered. Scout had lost a piece of her childhood, Drew carried scars both visible and invisible, Michael faced a future without the woman he once trusted completely, and Willow stood on the edge of losing everything she had built. Even Nina, who had fought so hard for a second chance at motherhood, now faced the possibility that loving her daughter meant accepting a truth she could barely endure. In the end, Scout's decision to speak out remained the defining moment of the entire saga. A child's voice had cut through layers of adult deception, forcing accountability where avoidance had long reigned. Whether Willow would be convicted or granted mercy, history would remember that it was Scout who changed the course of events, not through power or manipulation, but through honesty. And in Port Charles, where secrets are currency and silence is often safer than truth, that act of bravery would echo long after the courtroom doors finally closed. As the final arguments approached, the emotional toll of the trial began to show on everyone involved, but nowhere was it more visible than in the quiet moments between scenes, the stolen glances, the trembling hands, the long silences where words failed. Scout, though kept away from the courtroom, sensed the shift in the air. She asked fewer questions now, watching Drew carefully, as if measuring her own strength by his. Drew made a promise to her, one he intended to keep no matter the outcome, that her honesty would never be treated as a mistake. In a town where adults so often justified lies as protection, he wanted Scout to know that the truth she told was an act of integrity, not betrayal. Willow, facing the possibility of prison, began to unravel emotionally in ways she never had before. Late at night, she finally allowed herself to confront the gravity of that moment when the gun fired. Whether it had been fear, anger, or desperation, she now understood that intentions didn't erase consequences. For the first time, Willow stopped framing herself as a victim of circumstances and started acknowledging the pain she caused, not just to Drew, but to Scout, Michael, and everyone who had believed in her. That realization didn't absolve her, but it marked a turning point that even the jury could feel. Michael's final testimony wasn't about the shooting itself, but about trust. He spoke quietly, his words laced with disappointment rather than hatred, explaining how love can blind even the most careful heart. His honesty resonated deeply, underscoring the human cost of the crime. Nina listened from the gallery, tears streaming freely, torn between maternal loyalty and moral reckoning. When the court adjourned for deliberation, Port Charles held its breath. No verdict could undo what had been done, but the truth, spoken first by a brave child, had already changed everything. And in that truth, the town found a painful, undeniable reckoning that would shape its future forever.